Well, I can't really seem to keep my mind on one subject, because every step I take I find something else that I want to document or share or whatever. There's a little bitty hazelnut bush that was just loaded with ripe hazelnuts. I have no idea why that other one wasn't ripe. Maybe it's because it was so fully loaded that it was just taking longer. I don't know. I guess that's something I'll figure out as time goes on. But this is juniper. I think this is actually red cedar. It has the needles that are kind of sharp. It gets these little blueberries, which are, I guess, actually little pine cones. But I've heard that they use these in the process of making gin, and also I heard that people would use them to season their venison roast and stuff. So pretty cool. Cedar's a good tree to know. We have white and red cedar that I'm aware of, and white cedar has the flatter, softer needles, and red cedar has the needles that feel kind of sharp. And then right next to it is autumn olive. This is an invasive plant that's taken over a lot of the open areas. It has almost a silvery appearance on the underside of the leaf, and little like speckles all over it. And the berries, you can see they start out, I think, green and slowly turn to a red, and they have little speckles all over them. They have one big seed in the middle, and I've recently heard this plant had edible fruit, and I did determine how to identify it so I don't confuse it with something else, and I figured I would take the first step and actually do a little taste test on these berries once they're red and ripe, see what they taste like. Man, they're really good. They have a big old seed in them though, but just one big seed in the middle. They're really tart, and they taste like something. They have a really familiar fruity, tart fruity flavor. Boy, this camera has a hard time adjusting to the light, but hopefully you can see those. Hopefully it's not just a white blur. Little red berries. Wow, those are really good. There's the big seeds in the middle. It's mostly seed actually, but they're very abundant. I'm sure you could gather up a whole bunch and maybe make something out of them. They got a real good flavor. They almost taste like an apple, really. Kind of like maybe a Granny Smith apple. Very much like an apple. They're not real sour like a crab apple, but they've got that sour sweet flavor, kind of like a Granny Smith or something along those lines. Pretty interesting. I only ate a few. I ate like 4 or 5 because I don't like eating a bunch of anything, even though I know these are edible and I know what I'm identifying as autumn olive is actually autumn olive. Although with this plant I'm not so sure about using the common name, because there is Russian olive, and I think there might be a couple others that depending on the part of the country you live, some people call it autumn olive and some I think call it Russian olive. I don't know if that's just a confusion between the two species or if it's one of those common name things where one name means something to somebody else, you know. So I guess when you're discussing this plant, you should use the Latin name just to avoid uncertainty, but I don't recall what the Latin name is because I'm not that familiar with the Latin name of it. But I certainly know what the plant is because I've been seeing this plant for years. It's a good plant. The deer love it. It makes a good habitat for deer, but the problem is it's really invasive and it blocks out a lot of the other native species that are good for the environment and good for us as people as food too. So it's kind of I guess a win-lose situation. But I figured I'd just show you that. It's a plant that I'm familiar with, but I'm not familiar with it as far as edibility, and I'll only eat 4 or 5 berries and see if I have any kind of reaction to it. Even though it's edible, you know, some people can have reactions to edible foods, so you don't want to just go munching into it. But that's it. Hopefully I can stay focused on these hazelnuts long enough to gather up a few. I got a decent little mess. I probably got a couple hundred in there now. I think before the day's out I might have 1,000, so we'll see. Talk to you later. Well, this is it. I didn't really pick any more since the last video. I ended up actually getting distracted on something else. I had found a few other plants, some common evening primrose and a few other things, and I wanted to mark those spots for the future so I can go back and get some evening primrose root and soapwort root and a few other things. Yeah, I got about 150, and I think those came off of maybe 3 or 4 different bushes. So that's pretty cool. It's probably best not to gather a whole bunch until I'm more familiar with them anyway. But I'm just gonna let these lay out like this until they're good and dry, and then I can peel this little husk off here and have hazelnuts. The one plant that got me distracted was this right here, which the berries, the way they're arranged, it kind of reminds me of elderberries. So I thought it may be some type of relative of elderberry, and they were growing really abundantly. So I wanted to go back and check my Peterson's field guide and see if I found anything in there. I didn't find anything under elderberry or Sambucus species, which is the elderberry genera. But I'm gonna have to do a little more research on this one, try and find out what it is. It has opposite leaves that are in pairs. The branching is opposite. It has the small little warts like an elderberry branch does. The fruits are arranged the way an elderberry fruit cluster is, and the stem has a white hollow pith the way elderberry does, but the leaves don't match up to anything I've found. I've only found the red and the common elderberry, so I don't know if this is a related species or what, but I'm definitely not gonna just go munching into it because it kind of looks like an elderberry. I'm gonna have to do a little more research and see if I can figure out what this is and if it's a edible fruit or not. But that's about it. I just wanted to show you what I ended up with here. There's a whole bunch more hazelnut bushes, And you can see they're nice and ripe. They're turning brown. Thing I noticed with these is the ones that were growing in the woods had little to no nuts on them. The ones that were growing out in the field had lots of nuts, and they were generally ripe. And the ones that were bordering the field and the woods were kind of 50-50. Some of them had lots of fruit and some of them didn't, but none of them were ripe. So I'm thinking the sun has a lot to do with it. Maybe they prefer more open areas. When I first found these, I think last year or the year before, they were growing in the woods, and that was the only place I had found them, so I kind of assumed they were an understory bush. But it seems like they like to grow right out in the open fields if they can, and they seem to do really good out in the field. But it's just something to think about. I'm trying to find good areas for these where I can harvest a bunch, because it seemed like if I found one good bush, I could pick 50 or 100 off that one bush. And I also noticed that some of the bushes produced much bigger nuts, and some of the bushes produced little tiny nuts. I mean, you can see there's a huge size difference there. And it seemed pretty bush specific, so maybe there's a better strain that produces bigger fruits, or bigger nuts, I mean. These ones might not quite be ripe. I picked a couple and they popped right out of the green husk, and I just cracked them open with my knife and ate them, and they were really good. Nice and crunchy, just like the ones you buy in the store, hazelnuts. But that's it. I'm gonna wrap it up. Talk to you guys later.